Few years ago I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere it took a while for them to arrive and it got dark and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards I had dreams about him and he would talk to me and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but it was all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time and no doubt will be tonight after typing this.
About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired out of nowhere? Well yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass behind some bushes to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Some time later I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rear-view mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer, you know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Forget that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came round it, there was a freaking car parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rear view mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, hey you, get out of your car, now. I ran the hell out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story: don't sleep on the side of a deserted road.
A few summers ago I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead. But it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him I said, "Hey, behind you." And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my street and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a bitch, and he was going to kill me and all that. I lived right off the corner and I didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my front stoop staring out at the street like he knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in that area, unfortunately, downtown of a medium-sized city, so if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass, otherwise I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom, and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen.
When I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night we were really bored, and he suggested we go explore the house next door since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back, and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down, on the floor, across from this table, and are just hanging out, talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden my friend screams, and in that instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see, my body was engulfed in the sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming, and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back, and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the streetlight. It was December, and should have been much warmer inside of that house. Finally I look at my friend, and he looks scared. I'm really confused, and kind of panic myself and finally ask him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing, this figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl, crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently, I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends, and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes, and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. Ugh. I'm scared to get out of bed now.
I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day, before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there for like 10 seconds tops, before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us with its high beams on and riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are crapping our pants. He raps on the window, and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this is a busy road, and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort.
Similar story. I had just gotten home from Iraq and was visiting family up in the country at my grandparents' house. On the way back to my mom's house after dinner, the check engine light flipped on, and I pulled over as soon as I could to check the fluids and such, and I was crazy low on oil. Breaking down out here is bad simply due to the narrow roads and the miles you have to go to get anywhere. My mother was supposed to be leaving not long after me, so I sent her a text because calling was futile and decided to look around for a bit until she showed up. I had pulled over fairly close to this property alongside the river, but there was a crude wall in the front yard blocking view from the road. It looked abandoned, so I let myself in. There was a lot of pot growing inside the house. Everything had been gutted, and it was just plants and those heating lamps. I ran out faster than the speed of light and waited for my mom to pull up by the car. I put oil into the car and was about to be on our way when this rusty red truck drives by. The driver slows and looks at us, then turns around quickly and pulls up behind us. He was an older guy that looked like he hadn't showered in days, in blue overalls and no shirt. He jumps out and ran up to my mom's car and starts knocking on her window. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to have to kill this guy because we are going to die. We told him about the car and about me just getting home from deployment. He just stared at us for what felt like forever and told us that next time we break down to do is somewhere else. He stood by his truck until we were out of sight. When I was about 10, all of my cousins and siblings were over, about 10 of us there. The parents and grandparents were out for an adult dinner. So it was just the kids sitting around watching a few movies when all of a sudden the house shook and there was a large flash coming from the backyard. It felt as if a bomb dropped. We all heard, felt, and saw it, and as a pack we ran into the hallway. The eldest cousins in the group debated on calling the police, but opted to call the parents. After a few minutes we gained our courage and ventured out into the living room again, this time with weapons, just in case. After a half hour with no other issues, the parents came home and thought we were insane. There was nothing wrong with the backyard, and no neighbors reported anything. It's been 10 years, and we still talk about it, trying to figure out what it was. That has been the scariest thing to happen to me by far. Okay, so this happened to me last summer, when I was back at my parents' house during the holidays. It was around 3 a.m. and I was in my room on my computer when I got a call from my sister. Now that was already a little bit weird since my sister's room is just down the hallway from mine, and she could have just came in my room. I went to pick up and the call ended as soon as I reached the phone. I figured that she wanted to speak with me, so I got up and went to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming that someone was in the room with her, so I busted in and of course nobody was here. After she stopped crying she told me that she woke up and saw a dark shadow just centimeters from her face, and that's when she screamed. So I told her that she called me, she tell me that her phone is not in her room and that she was sleeping. Sure enough, her phone is actually downstairs in her purse. The weird part is that I have the log of her call on my phone but she doesn't. Never managed to explain this one.
One early morning a few short years ago, I am walking to my bus stop and eating a banana. It is dark, misty, around 5 a.m., and I am internally debating something trivial, like if I want my daily Starbucks before or after the commute. As I approach the dimly lit corner on my street, a tall man wearing a black mask steps out of the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disoriented, I barely acknowledge him. When he shouts, "Put down your purse," and points his gun to my head, things start to click. The man says, "Put down your bags," and I tell him, okay, I'm putting them down over here. He orders me to walk over to him, toward the alley, and get down on the ground, and I agree, I'm coming, okay. My heart is beating a million miles a minute, and my hands still smell sticky with banana. I know I need to get away. I don't know why, but my mouth won't stop working. Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please just take my stuff, but he doesn't like it. Shut the hell up, okay. He gets on top of me and puts the gun to my head. At this point, I should mention the fact that I'm on my way to coach a high school practice, and I'm dressed like a dude. Huge baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my telltale voice, I'd look like a prepubescent 90s rap star. Anyway, as the guy gets on top of me, gun to my head, he looks at me and pauses. I can't tell you why I know this, but I swear that at this moment, it clicks for him that I'm a woman. He gets off of me, stands up, and points to the dark alley. Come with me. My stomach hurts. I remember that there have been a recent rash of sexual assaults in my neighborhood, during the daytime no less. When the man points down that dirty alleyway, my internal voice started speaking up. The first voice said, "There was no way in hell you are going to go down there without a fight. But he has a gun, you idiot," replies the second voice. "Follow me." The real voice, his voice, hollers. So I do what I do best. I talk. "I'm coming, I'm following you." I call. And the man makes a crucial mistake, he believes me. I take 2 tiny steps backwards, toward the sidewalk. And he turns his body, and his gun, toward the alley. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, tuck my head down in case he starts shooting, and start sprinting away. I hear a voice screaming in a high-pitched wail before I realize that it's mine. After running 6 or 7 blocks, I head back to my apartment, hoping he's not there to see where I live. The police check out the alleyway an hour later, but the potential attacker is long gone. The only evidence of the encounter is my banana peel browning in the alleyway, and the adrenaline rush that I couldn't shake for days. I would be lying if I said that if that experience doesn't bother me still, but I'm so fortunate to mainly be haunted by the what-ifs, and not the what-dids. Back in 2004, I was a young dumb 17-year-old country girl in the city for the first time for college. One night I decided I could totally safely walk back to my dorm at around 1:30 in the morning, despite not really knowing where I was. Of course I instantly end up wandering around a terrible part of the city. Most of the streetlights are busted out, trash everywhere, loud arguments from inside the dilapidated row houses. In short, I wouldn't even want to be here in the middle of the day. A car drives up behind me and slows down, so they're keeping pace with me for nearly an entire block. I look over, and there are 5 unsavory-looking men inside. By this point, I was approaching an intersection, and they pull up, make a left, and stop in the street directly in my path. I completely panic at this point and just stand there, right in front of them. My mind went completely blank. I've never been that scared in my life. It didn't even make sense to try to run because they would have caught me without question. I'm not really sure how long I stood there, but suddenly the porch light in the house just past the car came on. Dude casually strolls outside carrying a bag of trash, and car peels away. I completely break down crying and shaking. Dude spots me and listens to my probably incoherent story, takes me inside and gives me a soda. Then he and his roommate walk me back to my dorm. They were both lovely and invited me to check out their stand-up sometime, but unfortunately I was too young to get into a bar. I never saw them again, don't even remember their names, but feel pretty confident that if that guy hadn't decided to take his trash out at 1 a.m. on a Saturday, my life would have taken a really bad turn that night.